Today I'd like to talk about integrating Microsoft Dynamics SL with Salesforce.com using Catalina Technologies API for Dynamics SL. Catalina Technologies API for Dynamics SL allows you to integrate external systems with many of the modules of Dynamics SL. Systems such as Salesforce.com, Magento, Shopify, ServiceMax, and many others can be integrated using our API. To get started, I've gone into Salesforce.com and I'm going to go ahead and create several different custom fields. What I want to be able to do is integrate my accounts in Salesforce.com back into Dynamics SL. So when I go ahead and convert a lead to an account, I want that to create a customer in SL. Or if I update an account, I also want to be able to update that customer in SL. So I'm going to go into Customize in Salesforce.com, and I'm going to edit my accounts, and I'm going to look at my fields. One of the first things you need to do is create a few custom fields in Salesforce so that you can go ahead and relate certain fields in SL back into Salesforce that don't exist in Salesforce. Examples would be the SL customer ID and the class ID, maybe the status, tax default, and terms. So if I look at terms, I've gone ahead and created a series of values that go ahead and match all the terms that are in SL so that I can then go and decide what kind of terms I want to tie to that customer or what I want to be able to show. So in this case, I've synchronized values in SL back into Salesforce for all the various terms. And likewise, I've done things for class ID, customer ID, status, tax default, etc. We also need to do something similar in Dynamics SL, where we create some custom fields so that we can relate back to Salesforce.com things such as the Salesforce.com account ID, so that when we do a synchronization, SL knows what's going on in Salesforce, and Salesforce knows what's going on in SL. So I've gone ahead and I've placed a particular field on my SL screen, and I'm just going to quickly go into customization mode, and I'm going to look at that field. So when I click on that, and I bring over the properties, I can see that I'm tying the user1 field from customer so that I can use that to store the Salesforce.com account ID. So here's where the fun begins. Now I can go ahead and transform data between the two data sources, between Salesforce.com and Dynamics SL. So I'm going to go into my transformations, and I see that I've got one for Dynamics CRM and Salesforce, and then I also have for SL. I'm going to go into the Salesforce.com one, and I'm going to pull up my different transformation objects, and I'm going to go ahead and look at my SL customer one. So what we have here is we show how we're tying things between one system to the other. So I see, if you remember, I created user1 in Dynamics SL, and that's going to go ahead and store the ID of the account in Salesforce. And name is going to name. Shipping street, I'm going to go ahead and plop into address 1, shipping city, and so forth and so on. And you can see throughout the different transformation. Also, if you see here, I'm putting my SL customer ID to my Salesforce custom field for the SL customer ID. I'm also putting in a few other things. I'm using a user2, and I'm dropping in the website and some other things like that. So now that we have our mapping done, probably one of the first things we want to do is be able to do an initial synchronization from one system to the next. In our case, we just got Salesforce.com. So we've had Dynamics SL for a while, so we're going to need to be able to get all those Dynamics SL customers into Salesforce.com as accounts. So I'm back in my Salesforce.com system, and I'm going to go into accounts. I can go and see that I currently only have 3 accounts. These are the ones that came pre-installed when I created my Salesforce.com account, but I want to be able to go ahead and get all of the Dynamics SL customers into Salesforce.com. Now back in our SL screen, we've gone and provided a simple and easy to use tool that will allow you to upload all of the SL customers to Salesforce.com. So we'll just go into the Catalina integration icon and we'll upload all the customers into Salesforce. So what this does is it goes and pulls the customers from SL and it uploads them into Salesforce. If they've already been uploaded once, what it'll do is it will update those customers. So if there's some kind of change, say in customer terms or in their status or something else that you want to be able to get up into Salesforce.com, this tool will go ahead and update the customer. Or if it's a brand new customer that it can't find in Salesforce.com at all, it'll go ahead and create that customer as a brand new customer. So right now, we've gone ahead and uploaded all those customers into Salesforce, and that should go ahead and create them as accounts in Salesforce.com. So back at our Salesforce.com screen, you can now see that we've only got the 3, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit refresh, and let's see what happens. So now we can go ahead and see all of our customers that came from SL. So if I click into one of these, you can see that it's gone and uploaded and updated the addresses and those types of things, but also it's filled in our custom field. So now I know that this custom field, CT0133, is the SL customer ID as opposed to the ID of Salesforce.com. So also, if you remember, we had several different customers or accounts that are in Salesforce.com that didn't exist yet in SL. If we go and look at those, they don't yet have an SL customer ID because we haven't done a two-way synchronization. And so I'm going to go ahead and show how we're doing this manually. Generally what we would do is either have this as a scheduled process or we would go ahead and add it into workflow. And I'll show you how to do workflow in the future of this presentation, but let's go back to SL and see what happened to the customers that we uploaded to Salesforce. Back in our Dynamics SL customer maintenance screen, I'm going to go ahead and pull up one of my existing SL customers and see what happens after I had pushed it up to Salesforce. So I'm going to go ahead and just quick do an F3, and I'm going to bring that back. Now remember, I had added this user1 field, and that user1 field is mapped to the ID in Salesforce.com. So now I have a two-way integration. So in Salesforce.com, it has this customer ID in its custom field, but then in SL, we have the Salesforce.com ID. So this now makes it easy for us to go ahead and change things in SL and have it go back into Salesforce.com because we know the ID of this account in Salesforce.com. So if I change School of Fine Art to Brian's Company, and let me just hit save, and I'm going to send this now to Salesforce.com. So if I hit send to Salesforce.com, what this will do is then push this account, and as you can see in the little message, it showed also the Salesforce.com account ID. So now if I go ahead and hit OK and go back to Salesforce.com, I should then be able to see that account. So here we've got the listing of customers before I hit refresh. So if you remember, I changed School of Fine Art to Brian's Company. So right now it says School of Fine Art because I haven't refreshed the browser yet, but if I hit refresh, I will then go ahead and see that it's automatically changed to Brian's Company. If I click in that, I see Brian's Company, and that goes to the SL customer ID of C300. So this makes it very easy to go ahead and change things. Now, say I want to go ahead and change this back to something else, and let's do this to Bob's Company. So what I do here is we've got what's called a workflow that we tie to a trigger. And so a trigger will happen anytime there is an update or an add new or delete that will then just fire off and then go through a series of workflow steps that then can automatically update SL. So I've just changed Brian's Company to Bob's Company, and I'm going to hit save. So now what's happened is Salesforce.com has fired off this trigger and caused a workflow to go off. And then when we go back into SL, we should go ahead and see that it's automatically changed to Bob's company. So this means that we have two-way synchronization between Salesforce.com and Dynamics SL. So back in the world of Dynamics SL, I'm going to go back to customer maintenance, and let me go ahead and search for C300, what I just changed in Salesforce.com. I'll tab out of that, and now I can see that it automatically changed it to Bob's company. So this really shows how quickly and dynamically we can go and make our integration between Salesforce and Dynamics SL. Now, if you also remember, we had a few Salesforce accounts that don't exist in SL. If I look at this, I don't see anything except items that start with C something. So I want to go and get those Salesforce.com accounts back into SL. So if I go back in here and I go into the Catalina integration, I can pull back Salesforce accounts. Now, normally, we wouldn't have to worry about this because we have that automatic triggering and workflow that would go ahead and create a brand new customer if someone goes and creates a customer in Salesforce, and it would automatically trigger over and send it there. Or it would also be able to do an update like I just showed where I changed it from Brian's company to Bob's company. But what if we had existing accounts in Salesforce.com that you wouldn't be able to have it automatically trigger because, well, they're already there? We can go ahead and also run another simple utility that we have that will go ahead and pull back Salesforce accounts to Dynamics SL. So I'm just going to go ahead and run our little tool, and it's going to retrieve all the accounts from Salesforce. You can see that it's retrieving it and setting it to a customer ID, and it'll pull them all back into SL. We had 3 customers that were sitting in there. Also, we're doing another update into SL as well because, you know, I've got it set so that it will go ahead and not only pull back new ones, but it'll also pull back updates and make sure that everything's synchronized. So we can go ahead and turn that on or off if you want to, but in this case, I've just got to bring everything back. So if it finds something in Salesforce that doesn't exist yet in SL, it'll go ahead and create that. Or if it finds something in Salesforce that exists in SL, it'll go and look that up and then update just the fields that we want to be able to update. So if I hit OK, and then I go back into my customer maintenance screen, I can then F3, and now I can see my Salesforce.com customers. And so if I click into that, I can see that I've got a Salesforce.com ID along with a new customer ID. In this case, what we're doing is the Catalina API is creating a new customer ID with particular rules that we set up in our API. We can also go ahead and use standardized rules that are based on SL rules. It's really up to you on how you want to go ahead and configure that. So now I've got this customer that I've pulled back into SL, and if you remember, that customer in Salesforce didn't have a customer ID, an SL customer ID. So let's go ahead and look at Salesforce and see what happened with those Salesforce.com accounts that we just pulled back to SL. Now back at my Salesforce.com account, I'm just going to go back into accounts, and I'll take a look at, say, Acme. That was one of the new ones that we created. If I click on Acme, we can see that it was created in SL, and once it was created in SL sent back a notification to Salesforce on what customer ID it is in SL. So this now gives us that two-way integration. So if you updated this customer here, it would then get updated back in SL and vice versa. Now let's say we want to go ahead and do something interesting. Let's go and add another field in Salesforce that we want to go and integrate back into SL. So for instance, I'll go into Acme. And if I look at Acme, I see that they have industry manufacturing. So this industry, while it really doesn't mean anything to the SL customer, maybe someone in SL wants to have that information for reference purposes. So I'm going to go and map this manufacturing to user 5. So if I go into into my mapping tool and look at my transformations, I'm going to go and copy that that field and map it back into SL. So if I go into SL Customer, this is my object that shows my mapping between the two, and I'm looking at my Salesforce account, I'm going to go and look for industry. So I see industry. I'm going to drag that over to my mapping, and I'm going to edit that, and I'm going to map industry to user 5. And then I'll go and save this. And when I'm going to then go into Dynamics SL, and I'm going to add that user 5 to my screen. So I'm just going to put it on, say, my address screen. So I'm going to go into customization mode, and I'm going to add that field. I'm going to add user 5 to that field. So if I insert an object, and I'm going to bind it to a text box, let's call this user 5. Hit next, and I want a customer, and we'll do user 5, which is a character 10 string. So I have that field out here. Let's just bring it down here so that I can take a look at it. I'll stretch it out a little bit, and then I'll get out of customization mode, and I'm going to save it. So if I hit save, yes. So if I go to a customer right now, you can see that I currently don't have anything in that field. So I'm going to go back into my website, and I'm going to, let's just change this real quick so that we can fire off our great little thing. We'll go to, let's do something else. We'll go into, say, telecommunications. That's a good one. And we'll hit save. So what this should be doing right now is firing off that trigger that then works the workflow. And then when I go back into SL, I forgot my customer ID. The customer ID is 00170. So let's move off of this guy real quick and go back into him. And now you can see telecommune. And so because it was a 10-character field, it just truncated that. But that doesn't really matter in our example, because I just want to be able to show that we can quickly add a new field, and by just dragging and dropping and pointing it to the appropriate field, it just does it. So now here comes the tricky part, because what happens if we save this information back to Salesforce? So if we force this back into Salesforce, this now says telecommune instead of telecommunications. So if I hit go back into my send to Salesforce, it's going to send that information back, and it's gone ahead and sent that. And now I go back into my Salesforce, and you see telecommunications, but once I refresh it, you can see now that Dynamics SL messed up that field. And so there are certain fields that we want to go ahead and make sure that one system or the other owns that data. So things like AR information, like customer class and terms and customer name and customer ID, those are probably going to be owned by SL. But then other fields, like something like industry or maybe the address or phone number, that's more tied to the contact or to Salesforce.com. So we don't want telecommunications or the industry to be overwritten by SL. So if I go back, let me go and fix this real quick and send it back to telecommunications and resave this. So now it says telecommunications. So I've just fixed Salesforce. So how do we go ahead and do this? How do we go ahead and decide which direction data is allowed to go? If I go back into my mapping tool and I go into this field that's user 5 to industry and vice versa, I can edit this, and I can decide which directions I want to go and ignore things from. So if I ignore from Salesforce, I don't want to ignore from Salesforce because I want Salesforce to be able to go and send information to SL, but I don't want SL to be overriding Salesforce data. So I'm going to ignore only from to. So what this will do is this will go and create a rule that says, okay, data coming from Salesforce, I want to go and keep in SL because Salesforce owns that data. So Salesforce will override that little piece of data, that one field in SL, because Salesforce owns it. But I don't want SL to override that because SL doesn't own it. SL only needs it for reference purposes. Salesforce owns that. So once I go and save that rule, I go yes, and then I go back into SL and I go and look at my, let's go off of this and back on it just so I go and make sure I get the latest and greatest that Salesforce sent back to me. I see it's telecommune, and I'll just save this customer, and I'm going to send this back to Salesforce. So it should try to send the whole customer, including the industry, back to Salesforce. So I'm still telecommune here, but when I go back into Salesforce and I see telecommunications, if I refresh it, it's still telecommunications. So it ignored that data from SL because, well, again, Salesforce owns that data. I'd like to thank you for your time, and if you have any questions or would like to have a live demo, you can email me at brian@catalinatechnology.com, and you can see more information about our solutions at www.catalinatechnology.com.